human development. So when we're talking about human development through embryonic development, this process will actually start with the fertilized egg. So the very beginning of development has to actually start with the combined sperm and egg to get a fertilized egg. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning. So a fertilized egg will now be called a zygote. So it's no longer a sperm and it's no longer an egg. When they come together and the egg has been fertilized by that sperm, that structure is now going to be called a zygote, which is a fertilized egg. This will occur in the uterine tube. So when the egg is released from the ovary, here is our ovary right here. So as the egg is going to be released from our vesicular follicle, and it will travel down the fallopian tube. Keep in mind this is a tube, so I'll give it a second layer. As it's traveling down this fallopian tube, and the sperm is coming up through the uterus, the sperm will travel into the uterine tube, and this is where fertilization will occur. So at this point, it's going to be called a zygote. Now, if this fertilized egg will then implant right here, this is usually going to cause challenges, which would be called an ectopic pregnancy. Ectopic means that the pregnancy is being implanted somewhere outside of where it should be. Where it should be implanted is in the wall of our uterus, but an ectopic pregnancy means our fertilized egg is actually implanting outside of that. They're usually going to present with challenges and have a different host. So we're going to follow a fertilized egg. It is going to be fertilized in the uterine tube. It will travel down through and then implant in this uterine wall. So now, again, this starts with a fertilized egg. So this zygote. This fertilized egg, which occurs in the uterine tube. So the next step is going to be where this fertilized egg, which is just egg plus the sperm, this zygote, will move into something called a 4-cell stage. And this is where it goes from 1 and it will divide into essentially one mass of 4. This is the 4-cell stage. This usually occurs at about 2 days. 2 days after fertilization, you will have the 4-cell stage. The next stage that this will go through is called the morula stage. And essentially what this is becoming is it will become a solid ball. So you will have your 4, which is one big blob, and it will essentially become a solid ball of a bunch of division of cells. So those 4 will continue to divide until you get a solid ball. Think more like a golf ball for this. So it's going to be completely solid, the morula. This happens at 3 days after fertilization. So you're going to go from 4 cells to a morula, which is a solid ball of cells, and that occurs at about 3 days. That's very, very rapid. Then this morula will be called what is an early blastocyte. So cyte means cell. So an early blastocyte is an early cell. This is going to be a hollow ball. So think more like a tennis ball for this. So we've taken our big ball of golf ball cells. It's full. And essentially, this is going to convert into just the outside layer being a ring of cells. So if you were to cut this ball in half, what you get is essentially a ring of cells around the outside, and the inside is going to be empty and hollow. This is an early blastocyte. This will happen at 4 days. This is also when it will implant in the uterus. So at this point, the early blastocyte will implant in the uterus. It is a hollow ball of cells. It will eventually fill with fluid, and this happens at about 4 days. That early blastocyte will then become your implanting blastocyte. So your implanting blastocyte is still going to be this hollow ball of, starting this hollow ball of cells, but it is actually going to implant and not just be in the uterus, it will implant to the uterus. So at this point, this implanting blastocyte with our uterus that kind of looks like this, and as it travels down, it will implant into the side of this uterus, and it will implant into that endometrium that is there. This is the implanting blastocyte. What is different about this is this will actually occur at about 7 days. So it'll take it a little while to implant, and this will occur at around, begins at 7 days. What's interesting about this implanting blastocyte is it will start having 2 layers. The first layer will be an outside layer that will be called the trophoblast. So that will be the black layer. And then the inside layer is going to be called the inner cell mass. And that will be the green in this image right here. So if this implanting blastocyte is implanting on our uterine wall in our endometrium, that's awesome. So this outside layer, which is called the trophoblast, will eventually become the placenta. So this is where the embryo will start to develop, will be inside this placenta. So this black outside layer, which is the trophoblast, will essentially become the placenta, whereas this inner cell mass, or this inside layer, will become the actual embryo. So that is what will happen when it implants into the uterine wall as an implanting blastocyte. The next part that occurs after this is going to be the gastrula stage. Gastrula stage. And this is where you are actually going to develop the layers of the embryo. And these layers that you are going to develop will become all of the systems, all of these structures, and all of the characteristics that we have talked about this semester. So at the gastrula stage, you're going to develop 3 what are called germ layers, or 3 developmental layers. The first layer is going to be the ectoderm. This is the exterior, ecto, it is the outside layer. This outside layer will eventually become the outside layer of your body, which is going to be your skin. But also your nervous system will develop from the ectoderm. So essentially you will create the external layer and the sensory system in your ectoderm. The next layer you will have is your mesoderm. And your mesoderm will be creating all of the middle structures and middle layers. This will be your circulatory system and your skeletal system, all of your bones. So all of the pieces that are going to make up that, essentially the structure of your body, will be from the mesoderm layer. And then the third layer you will develop is the endoderm. The endoderm layer is going to be the most internal layer. So that will eventually become your internal systems of your digestive and your respiratory and urinary and reproductive and all of those other systems that are internal will come from this endoderm. So essentially this hollow ball of cells will implant in the uterine wall. It will differentiate and create the placenta from the outside layer. The inside layer will become the embryo. The way that embryo develops is it will develop 3 layers, and those layers will eventually become all of the systems that we have talked about. The endoderm will become the skin and the nervous system. The mesoderm will become the skeletal, the circulatory system in the bones. And then your endoderm will turn into your digestive, your respiratory, your urinary, and your reproductive system, essentially all of your internal organs. This gastrula stage will actually occur probably earlier than you think. So whereas your 4-cell stage was at 2 days, your morula was at 3 days, your early blastocyte was at 4 days, and then by 7 days you were starting to do the implantation of your blastocyte. Between that and your gastrula stage, where you have developed all of these layers, this will be at 6 weeks. So that means by 6 weeks, you will have all of the body's organs laid out and developed. These are not going to be the large size. That means that you will just have all of the body's organs. So if you think about it, at 6 weeks, if we are developing the circulatory system, that is when the heart starts to beat, because that is when there is blood vessels and blood that has been created. So this is why at 6 weeks, you're able to really ascertain the level of pregnancy, is because all of the body's organs are laid out, and then the next part of pregnancy will be growth and further development and refinement, but all of the foundational structures of your body are in place by 6 weeks. This is interesting to note because usually by 6 weeks there's a lot of people who aren't even aware that they're pregnant yet. So all of this is happening a lot of times prior to actually being aware of that pregnancy. So this is the general flow of what is occurring with embryonic development, starting with a fertilized egg and then ending where at 6 weeks, where we have developed the 3 germ layers of the gastrula stage. At that point, as the development is going to continue and the growth is going to continue, by week 9, it is no longer called an embryo, but it is now going to be referred to as a fetus. So for the technical medical definitions of when things are called what, it starts as a zygote, which is the fertilized egg. Then it goes into a blastocyte, which is going to be the part that implants into the uterus. That will go into the embryo, and then by 9 weeks, that term will then be converted into a fetus, and growth of everything will continue to occur.